welcome to Storytime. My name is Mary, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. We're going to read a couple of books, maybe 3 if we have time. We're going to start with The Library Mouse. Then we're going to read How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World. And then maybe a little book called The Fire Cat. Depends on how our time goes. So, let's dive in, shall we? This is Library Mouse by Daniel Kirk. Sam was a library mouse. His home was in the library in a little hole in the wall behind the children's reference book. And he thought that life was very good indeed. Have a look at Sam. There he is in his little hole behind the children's reference books. Every day, when the library was full of people walking up and down the aisles, studying, checking out books, and working on the computers, Sam was curled up in his little hole, sound asleep. Every night when the people went home and the moon was dark and quiet, the library belonged to Sam. There's all the people walking around the library during the day. Sam is napping until it's time to come out at night. And every night, Sam read and read and read. Sam read picture books and chapter books. He read biographies and poetry, cookbooks and sports books, fairy tales and ghost stories and mysteries by the dozen. Sam's mind was filled with facts and information and images of faraway places, and his imagination brimmed over with wonder and fantasy. One night, Sam decided it was time he wrote a book of his own. Sam folded over some little squares of paper that he found on the librarian's desk to make the pages. Then he found a pencil that had rolled underneath a shelf, and he began to write. Write what you know, Sam had read in a book about writing. So Sam wrote about being a mouse. He drew pictures for his book by posing in his little mirror and then sketching what he saw. Sam worked very, very hard, and finally his first book was done. He called it Squeak, A Mouse's Life, and he wrote on the cover, Words and Pictures by Sam. He went to the biography and autobiography section of the library, and he tucked his first book onto the shelf. Then he went back to his little hole in the wall and waited. The next afternoon, sunlight streamed into the library windows. "What's this?" asked a girl whose teacher had sent her to the library to do a book report. "I've never seen anything like this before," said the librarian, and she put Squeak, A Mouse's Life on her desk. Later, she showed it to the other librarians. Sam decided to write another book. It was called The Lonely Cheese, and working on the book made him feel very hungry. It was a good thing that he always found so many crumbs to eat by the trash basket in the hallway. When he had finished the illustrations, Sam scurried to the picture book section and proudly placed his new book on the shelf. Then he went back to his little hole in the wall and waited. The next morning, sunlight streamed in through the library windows. "What's this?" asked a little boy who was looking for a big book about trucks. "It's another book by Sam," said the librarian. "Just who is this Sam?" she thought to herself, and she put The Lonely Cheese on her desk. Later, she showed it to the children at story time. Sam decided to write a chapter book. It was called The Mystery of Mouse Mansion, and it gave Sam goosebumps when he wrote down the scary parts. The full moon was shining through the windows of the darkened library when Sam crept over to the mystery section and sneakily placed his book on the shelf. Then he went back to his little hole in the wall and waited. The next day, sunlight streamed in through the library windows. "What's this?" asked a teenager who was looking for a good creepy book to read before bed. "We have got to find out who this Sam is," said the librarian. "I'll leave a note on the bulletin board and tell him that I would like to meet our mysterious new author." She put The Mystery of Mouse Manor on her desk, and later she showed it to the writing class that came in after school. That night, Sam found the note. It read, "Dear Sam, all of us at the library have been enjoying your books immensely. We are all wondering who this mysterious Sam really is. Whoever you are, you certainly have a lot of talent. Not everyone has it in them to write even a single book, let alone 3. We think it would be fun to have a Meet the Author Day with you as our special guest. The children would love to hear you read your books and share some of your secrets for writing. Yours truly, Mrs. Forrester, Head Librarian." Sam felt very nervous. He was happy that the children at the library liked his books. He was flattered that they wanted to meet him. But mice, as a rule, are very shy when it comes to meeting people. Sam could not understand why people thought that writing and making up stories was so hard. If only they would try, they might find out that writing was really lots of fun. Sam had an idea. He went to the librarian's desk and got some supplies. All night long he wrote and drew and snipped and stapled his little rectangles of paper into mouse-sized books. In the morning, when the librarian opened up the children's room, there was a sheet of paper taped to the door. "Meet the author today," it read. A little girl was the first one to see Sam's display, all set up on the front table. "What is this?" she asked. There sat a tissue box with a pair of pencils taped to the sides and a banner stretched across the top. On the banner was written, "Meet the author," with an arrow pointing down into the box. What do you think is in that box? The little girl bent over to look in the empty tissue box. "Oh," she said in surprise, for there at the bottom of the box lay Sam's little mirror, and the little girl saw her own face smiling up at her. "Me?" she said. "An author?" Next to the mirror was a stack of tiny blank books and a pile of pencils that Sam had sharpened with his little teeth. All that day, and for many more days thereafter, people came to the little display to meet the author. Soon there was a whole shelf full of books written and illustrated by people who had never written a book before, telling stories that had never been told. Sam was a library mouse. His home was in a little hole in the wall behind the children's reference books. All that night, Sam sat in his hole thinking and thinking about the next book he would write. Would it be a mystery, an adventure, a funny book, a true story? There were so many stories to tell. Aha, he thought. I'll just have to write one of each. Sam picked up his pencil and got to work. The end. As you can tell, I really like books. So that book is one of my favorites. And you know what I was thinking of when I was reading? That maybe at your house, you might like to find some paper and some pencils and make some little mouse-sized books. And maybe everyone in your family could write their own book. And you could have a meet the author day at your own house. Wouldn't that be fun? All you need is some paper and some pencils, and anybody can do that. Well, let's read another book, shall we? This book is called How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World by Marjorie Priceman. Are you making a lot of pies in your house right now? Well, you're not leaving your house very much. I hear a lot of people are doing some baking while they're staying home, and I am too. I'm not very good at apple pie yet. Maybe this book will help us. How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World. Making an apple pie is really very easy. First, get all the ingredients at the market. The list says apples, flour, sugar, cinnamon, salt, butter, egg. First, get all the ingredients at the market, mix them well, bake, and serve. Unless, of course, the market is closed. In that case, go home and pack a suitcase. Take your shopping list and some walking shoes. Then catch a steamship bound for Europe. Use the 6 days on board to brush up on your Italian. If you time it right, you'll arrive in Italy at harvest time. Find a farm deep in the countryside. Gather some superb semolina wheat. An armful or two will do. Then, hop a train to France and locate a chicken. French chickens lay elegant eggs, and you want only the finest ingredients for your pie. Coax the chicken to give you an egg. Better yet, bring the chicken with you. There's less chance of breaking the egg that way. Get to Sri Lanka any way you can. You can't miss it. Sri Lanka is a pear-shaped island in the Indian Ocean. The best cinnamon in the world comes from there, from the bark of the native karundu tree. So, go directly to the rainforest. Find a karundu tree and peel off some bark. If a leopard is napping beneath the tree, be very quiet. Hitch a ride to England. Make the acquaintance of a cow. You'll know she's an English cow from her good manners and charming accent. Ask if you can borrow a cup or two of milk. Even better, bring the whole cow with you for the freshest possible results. Stow away on a banana boat headed home to Jamaica. On your way there, you can pick up some salt. Fill a jar with salty seawater. When the boat docks in Jamaica, walk to the nearest sugar plantation. Introduce yourself to everyone. Tell them about the pie you're making. Then go into the field and cut a few stalks of sugarcane. You better fly home. You don't want the ingredients to spoil. Wait a minute. Aren't you forgetting something? What about the apples? Have the pilot drop you off in Vermont. You won't have to go far to find an apple orchard. Pick 8 rosy apples from the top of the tree. Give 1 to the chicken, 1 to the cow, and eat 1 yourself. That leaves 5 for the pie. Then hurry home. Now, all you have to do is mill the wheat into flour, grind the kurundu bark into cinnamon, evaporate the seawater from the salt, boil the sugar cane, persuade the chicken to lay an egg, milk the cow, churn the milk into butter, slice the apples, mix the ingredients, and bake the pie. While the pie is cooling, invite your friends and family to share it with you. Remember that apple pie is delicious, topped with vanilla ice cream, which you can get at the market, unless the market happens to be closed. In that case, you can eat it plain. The end. And if you'd like an apple pie recipe, there's one right here in the book just to help you out. Isn't that nice? I hope you're enjoying some apple pie while you're staying at home. I think we have time for one more book, so let's do it. This book is called The Fire Cat by Esther Averill. This is an early reader book. That means it's meant for children who are just learning how to read. And so the words in this book are kind of short to help you with learning how to read them. But it's a book about a cat. I like cats. I hope you do too. Once upon a time, there was a yellow cat with black spots in his fur. His name was Pickles. Pickles was a young cat. His paws were big, and he wished to do big things with them. But where could Pickles find anything big to do? Pickles lived in a barrel. The barrel was all that he had for a home. Pickles' barrel was in an old yard where there was nothing big to do. So what did Pickles do? He ran after little cats. He ran after every little cat that came into the yard, and he chased those little cats out of the yard. This was a bad, bad thing. But it was all that Pickles could find to do. Next to Pickles' yard was a house. In the house lived many cats who called out to Pickles, "You are bad. You cannot be our friend." But Pickles did have one friend in the house. His friend was Mrs. Goodkind. Every day, Mrs. Goodkind came into the yard and gave Pickles something to eat. One day, Mrs. Goodkind said, "Pickles, you are not a bad cat. You are not a good cat. You are good and bad. And bad and good. You are a mixed up cat. What you need is a good home. Then you will be good." Mrs. Goodkind picked up the mixed up cat. She took him into her home to live. In Mrs. Goodkind's home, there was a pretty chair for Pickles to sit on. There were toys for him to play with. But Pickles did not want to sit on a pretty chair. He did not want to play with toys. So he ran back to his barrel in the yard, and he began to chase little cats again. Mrs. Goodkind said to Pickles, "Things cannot go on like this. Something will have to happen." The next day, Pickles chased a little cat up an old tree. He climbed up after her. Pickles sat up in the tree near the little cat, and he would not let her climb down. After a time, the wind began to blow. It blew and blew and blew, and the rain came down hard. It came down harder and harder. At last, Pickles let the little cat climb down and go home. Pickles wanted to climb down too. He wanted to get back into his barrel, but he could not climb down. Sometimes this happens to a cat, and it happened to Pickles. Mrs. Goodkind ran to the tree. "Pickles!" she called. "Please try to climb down." But Pickles could not climb down. Mrs. Goodkind ran into her house. Pickles could see her by the window. She was talking on the telephone. Then she called out to Pickles, "The firemen are coming!" A fire truck came up the street and stopped at Pickles' yard. Three firemen jumped down from the truck. Mrs. Goodkind came out of her house. She ran to the firemen and pointed to Pickles. The firemen put a ladder against the tree. One of the firemen began to climb up the ladder. The fireman climbed to the top of the ladder. "Come, cat," he said to Pickles. "Come, let me help you." The fireman picked up Pickles and tucked him into his coat. Then he took Pickles down the ladder, down to Mrs. Goodkind. "Mrs. Goodkind," said the fireman, "is this your cat?" "No, Joe," said Mrs. Goodkind. "Pickles has no home, and he does not want to live with me." "Why?" asked Joe. Mrs. Goodkind answered, "My home is too little for Pickles. Pickles is a cat who wishes to do big things, and someday he will do them. Look at his big paws." Pickles put out a paw for Joe to see. "My goodness, Pickles," said Joe, "what big paws you have." Pickles looked at Joe and said the one word he could say, "Meow." And Joe could see that Pickles wanted something very much. Joe gave Pickles a pat. "Pickles," he said, "I will take you to our firehouse. Maybe our chief will let you stay." Joe took Pickles to the chief, who was sitting at his desk. "Oh," said the chief, "I know this young cat. He is the one who chases little cats." "How do you know?" asked Joe. The chief answered, "A fire chief knows things." Just then the telephone began to ring. "Hello," said the chief. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Goodkind. Yes, Pickles is here. He came with Joe." "What do you say? You think Pickles would like to live in our firehouse? Well, we shall see. Thank you, Mrs. Goodkind. Goodbye." The chief looked at Pickles and said, "Mrs. Goodkind says you are not a bad cat, and Joe likes you. If I let you live here, I will let you live here if you will learn to be a good firehouse cat." Pickles walked quietly up the stairs after Joe. Joe and Pickles went into a room where the firemen lived. The men were pleased to have a cat. They wanted to play with Pickles, but suddenly the fire bell rang. All the firemen ran to a big pole, and down they went. The pole was the fastest way to get to their trucks. Pickles could hear their trucks start up and rush off to the fire. Pickles said to himself, "I must learn to do what the firemen do. I must learn to slide down the pole. He jumped and put his paws around the pole. Down he fell with a bump. Bumps or no bumps, I must try again, said Pickles. Up the stairs he ran. Down the pole he came and bumped. He tried again and bumped. He tried again and bumped. But by the time the firemen came back from the fire, Pickles could slide down the pole. What a wonderful cat you are, said the fireman. The chief did not say anything. Pickles said to himself, I must keep on learning everything I can. So he learned to jump up onto one of the big fire trucks. And he learned to sit up straight on the seat while the truck raced to a fire. What a wonderful cat you are, said the fireman. The chief did not say anything. Pickles said to himself, now I must learn to help the firemen with their work. At the next fire, he jumped down from the truck. He ran to the big hose and put his big paws around it. He tried to help a fireman shoot the water at the flames. What a wonderful cat you are, said the fireman. The chief did not say anything. The next day, the chief called all the firemen to his desk. Then he called for Pickles. Pickles did not know what was going to happen. He said to himself, maybe the chief does not like the way I work. Maybe he wants to send me back to my old yard. But Pickles went to the chief. At the chief's desk stood all the firemen and Mrs. Goodkind. The chief said to Pickles, I have asked Mrs. Goodkind to come because she was your first friend. Pickles, jump up on my desk. I have something to say to you. Pickles jumped up on the desk. He looked at the chief. Out of the desk, the chief took a little fire hat. Pickles, said the chief, I have watched you at your work. You have worked hard. The time has come for you to know that you are now our fire cat. And with these words, the chief put the little hat on Pickles' head. Pickles made friends with all the firemen, but he did not make friends with any cats. When cats came to the firehouse to look at the trucks, Pickles chased them away. The chief called Pickles to his office and said, a fire cat must be kind to everyone. You must be good to the other cats. Little by little, Pickles learned to be good to the cats he met. He made friends with them too. Then all the cats loved to come to the firehouse. On rainy days, most cats stayed home, and Pickles sat upstairs with the firemen. One rainy day as he sat there, he thought to himself, how bad I was when I chased other cats. Once I chased a little cat up a tree. Oh me, oh my, why did I do that? Suddenly, Pickles heard the chief call out, cat in a tree! Fireman Joe and the two other men slid down the pole. Pickles slid down with them. He heard the chief say, the tree's in the old yard next to Mrs. Goodkind's house. Oh, thought Pickles, that's the yard where I lived. And that's the tree. Pickles jumped up on the truck with the three firemen. Away they rode to the yard, and there in the wind and the rain stood Mrs. Goodkind, pointing to a very little cat. The fireman put a ladder against the tree. The ladder scared the little cat, and she ran to a high branch where a fireman could not go. Joe said to Mrs. Goodkind, I don't know what to do. But Pickles knew. He began to climb the ladder. Pickles climbed up and up. It was hard work, but at last he came to the top of the ladder. Then he climbed up the tree until he came to the little cat. "Come, cat," he said. "Let me help you." He picked her up and took her gently down to Mrs. Goodkind. Mrs. Goodkind thanked Pickles. Then she said to him, "I always knew that someday you would do big things. Today, you have done something very big." Pickles waved a paw at her, as if to say, "Mrs. Goodkind, this is only a beginning." And he rode home to the firehouse, a proud and happy cat. The end. Well, thank you for staying with me through that story time. I'm so glad you came to join us. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a good Friday afternoon. Good night, everybody. God bless.